All right, welcome to KAKTUS. You're on.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jules. And this is a very special occasion, kind of a bittersweet occasion, that this is the 1-year anniversary of our move to Zoom for the KAKTUS poetry series. Before that, we used to be at the KAKTUS Brewery in Bernalillo, New Mexico, just down the road, about 2 miles. And last March was the first time we moved to Zoom. And it's, I say bittersweet because we certainly miss the ambiance, the beer and pizza, or, the face-to-face connections. But we've also made a lot of new friends, and we've been able to see old friends from Rochester, from Buffalo, from Minnesota, and so and New England, and so forth. So as well as meeting a lot of new people from around the world. So that's been overall it's been a very good experience. And we're going to get started with the 2 features. Then we'll go to the open mic, and we're doing something a little bit different with the open mic this time, which we'll explain when we get started. I wanted to again thank Jules for her help with all the technical aspects of this event, and we've been pretty fortunate with our Zoom experience over the past year. I want to start with, since it's kind of an anniversary of hopefully leaving the worst of 2020 behind, I'm going to start with a poem of mine that's not in my Joe Rides Again, Joe the Poet book, but it's called Joe the Poet Escapes 2020. Joe found his Joe mentum sorely tried when he inadvertently touched down on the planet Earth in the year 2020. He barely got out with his incarnation intact, not to mention his faith in the intrinsic goodness of most galactic beings. Afterwards, sitting at the cafe at the end of the known universe, he discussed the horrors of Earth 2020 with his drinking companions, Billy Pilgrim and Doctor Who, explaining how being stranded on Earth 2020 was worse than enduring the proverbial phone booth in a Schenectady snowstorm, and how all Earth 2020's fires, floods, storms, and quakes were bad enough, but they had a global pandemic too, and if that weren't enough, a mad leader with a MAGA cult worse than the cult of Skaro. Now, Billy and the good doctor nodded sympathetically, said they'd heard similar accounts about Earth 2020 from other travelers, and advised Joe to be just a little less spontaneous in his travels, maybe consult the Hitchhiker's Guide. As for Earth 2020, it was presumably superseded by Earth 2021, but no one at the table expressed much interest in finding out whether conditions there had improved any. Hopefully they have. So our first reader is Lauren McLean Ayer, who's a San Francisco grown poet and writer who now lives in Santa Fe, just up the road. And couple of years ago, we were doing our Poets Speak series, 5-volume anthologies, and MJ contacted me, who had some work in the anthologies, contacted me and said, I have a relative in Santa Fe who's a poet as well, and Lauren, in fact, did publish in our survival anthology, and we got to meet her up at, I think it was the Teatro Paraguas Theater up in Santa Fe, which was really neat. And a couple more things about her. She says, when not staring at blank pages trying to write, she likes to design and make quilts inspired by plants. Her poems have appeared in Gargoyle magazine, Santa Fe, One Heart, Adobe Walls, The Poets Speak, Survival, and others. So we're very much looking forward to hearing Lauren.
Hello, everyone. This is my first time reading on Zoom, which is kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little cross section of the kind of stuff I write. A little bit of my grandfather in Rochester, where I lived when I was young, and a little bit of the apocalypse, and then we'll just go from there. The first poem is called Inheritance. We lived with ghosts. They watched over our shoulders, listened with invisible ears to the stories he told me, slept at the foot of his bed. He had carried them with him, heavy as they were, from places whose names I couldn't pronounce, no matter how many times I'd heard them whispered. Their words soothed me to sleep in that big empty house, softening the edges of too many words unspoken over way too many years. When he left, first slowly, then suddenly, their care fell to me. Their weight was too much at first, little as I was, but not anymore. Their eyes are now my eyes. Their ears are now my ears. Their words, the gravity that guides this pen and keeps me tethered here. So that one's about my grandfather. And we're going to go to my grandmother. It's called Pilgrimage. Her favorite color was blue. Blue as her eyes, blue as my wide New Mexico sky, which she only saw in postcards. I brought her dirt for Christmas from the Santuario de Chimayo. Kneeled on the earthen floor, reaching deep into that hole with my hands to gather it. The room was small, the hallway lined with tiny crutches of children who had walked again. I hoped maybe she would too, but she was already too tired. Why walk when there is someone waiting to carry you? Why walk when you can feel the wings sprouting within you, burning along your spine like fire? Yes, it hurt. Of course it hurt. But she knew that that was the cost of finally being able to fly. This next one is called How to Fold a Paper Boat. And it's actually talking about my other grandparents at the end. A little bit of Santa Fe, a little bit of Rochester. Okay. How to fold a paper boat. Tear one sheet of paper from a yellow legal pad, trusting your hands to remember. First, make one diagonal fold, cutting off whatever's left over. Unfold the triangle and fold it again from unfolded corner to its opposite corner. Remember that this is the way to fold a paper bird, which may not float so well in the shallow current of the Santa Fe River, which is lucky to have any water at all this deep into summer. Remember the sharp, swift creek on your grandmother's farm, where you used to spend summers. How clear the water was, how you could see each pebble, each fish, each crawdad as clear as glass, but magnified. Remember the 4th of July, sitting on her porch swing as you watched a single road flare burn bright against the night, as mosquitoes zapped green, popping and crackling like fireworks. So the next two I'm going to read are the ones that John and Jules published in Poets Speak Survival. The first one is How to Survive the Flood. Stitch a boat from tiny scraps, the cuff of his old flannel shirt, the wide hem of your grandmother's best dress, the velvet ear of a once stuffed bear. Coat it in wax to protect against weather, against salt and water, against waves and their violence, against the dark-scaled things that circle beneath us. Fill it up with sweets from childhood, with memories and stories, with match and tinder, with whatever sustains us. Each night words devour blanked pages. Each night fire devours our words. Bathe in the ash to absorb each inflection, becoming the light that will guide us to land. Okay, and this next one is Lullaby. A world like this could make a girl agoraphobic, especially one who at the age of 4 began her very own memorial roll call list, which has now grown so long she has forgotten her own name. Sometimes, she says, I want to wall myself into this tiny casita, while others, I want to run through the streets, naked and on fire, burning all death from the world. But usually, I just sit in my room, watching streamed TV to drown out the noise, and do my best each night to rock myself to sleep. Okay, and keeping on the apocalypse theme, this one is called Olive Branch. I am dreaming birds, bright flowers, discharged from bombs instead of death. A broken bouquet of blood-colored roses, ivory gardenias for ghostly ash, scenting the sight like paradise. Pale petals rise, take flight as doves, travel in search of olive branch. It's out there, they coo. It must be. Steadily, devotedly, I plant its seed. This next poem is more of a personal apocalypse. When I moved to Santa Fe, I met a guy, and We went out for almost 2 years, and out of the blue, he broke my heart. And this is the poem I wrote after that. It's called Act As If. Get out of bed, brush your teeth, and wash your hair. Get dressed as though you still believe you're beautiful. Pick up the phone and call your mom, or write a letter to a friend, as though you still believe a voice could cheer you. Put on your coat, walk out the door, breathe deep of lilac and petrichor, as though you still believe this world holds wonder. Let time move by. Hold open your mind until you remember. It does. Some can. You are. The good news is that story had a happy ending because he introduced me to the love of my life, who's trying to be quiet while he's sitting on the couch watching me. So this is the poem that I wrote called Perhaps the Night. I wrote it when I got home from our first date. Perhaps it was the way Venus hung low in the sky, watching her lover Jupiter from across constellations. Perhaps it was the scent of sweet jasmine and roses, drifting through the night air, warm and intoxicating. Perhaps it was the gravity between two bodies, at rest and in motion, trying not to, but longing to collide. Okay, and continuing on with the celestial theme, a poem I wrote after receiving a postcard from a friend of mine of female scientists and engineers. This one is called Valentina Tereshkova, Engineer and Cosmonaut. What must it have felt like, that weightlessness, that wide open space before you, knowing you had become unbound from gravity? Was it freedom you sought out there among the stars? A star yourself now, you must have felt at home, surrounded by all that dark and silence, pricked by so many points of light. Did your heart expand to fill the emptiness around you? Or did you discover that all that space wasn't really empty at all? Okay, and the last two are back to my grandfather. The first one is Daughter of War. Born into the lives of broken men, everything was ephemeral. I learned early not to hold too tight, lest I lose my balance and slip away myself someday. I knew what that meant. I'd seen it in their eyes, the shadows where maybe light once lived, and maybe even joy. I'd felt joy myself a few times, carried it still, cupped between my hands like fireflies, phosphorescent and shimmering, glowing just enough to light my way. Okay, and this last one, Autumn on Dewey Avenue, 1969. I spent my young days with my grandfather, reading books, listening to stories, walking slowly up autumn blocks. Tall poplars arched their gnarled branches over those streets, their crowns and the pavement on fire with red and gold leaves. My grandfather smoked a cigarette, held my tiny hand. There was no one else in the world, no other world at all. There were only the steep-roofed houses and the sound the breeze made as it meandered down the street at a pace as gentle as our own. Somewhere there was a grandmother fussing over dinner. Somewhere there was a mother holding her swollen belly, a sister fretting, a father working. Somewhere there were ends and beginnings, but not here, not here. Here was the moment that would stretch on forever, longer than the street whose end we would never reach, further away than the winter that would never come. Somewhere there was a white rocking horse with red runners, waiting for a lost little girl to ride with desperation and abandon, trying to catch up with a grandfather who had finally walked too far without her. But not now, not now. Now that horse sat still and silent as a leaf, keeping the secret of the coming snow.
You may unmute. Applaud.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks.
A wonderful
The
reading.
first Zoom reading. Yay, that was great.
Gorgeous, Lauren.
Loved it.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
beautiful.
Stunning.
And so precise, so precise. Yeah.
Crafted. They tuned in.
Yeah.
Great.
Super.
Incredibly touching, incredibly touching.
And beautiful and nicely orchestrated too, the themes. Yeah. So I know it's a little weird the first time reading on Zoom because you don't hear any applause. Right? Yeah, it's that makes it a little weird, but you'll get used to it. So.
We'll send you the chat later. You can.
Yeah, and
Okay,
we'll
thank you.
save the chat.
Scroll back. Yeah. So yay.
Yeah,
Yay.
gorgeous.
Good. All right. Yeah. And hi, I see Sandy Yanone here, back in Olympia, Washington. Good to see you there. And we're up to 48 people, and good.
And another Iuppa here.
Yeah,
Another-
hi, Joanne.
Yeah. Good. You're going to outnumber us soon. Okay. Anyway, good. So we are going to move on to our second feature, also an Iuppa. What can I say about MJ Iuppa, except that, you know, I count her as one of my poetry partners in crime. When I lived in Rochester, some of you know, I taught at Rochester Institute of Technology for 20 years. And for a number of years, MJ and I would collaborate on bringing people two poets to Rochester, and they would read at St. John Fisher College, one of the places that MJ teaches, and also at RIT, and that we could pool our resources in a way. And make it. And actually, indirectly, I may have met Jules, my wife, lovely wife, Jules Nyquist, because we met in August 2011. That spring, MJ and I collaborated on bringing Margaret Randall, the Albuquerque poet Margaret Randall, to Rochester. And it was Margaret that told me about the conference in Albuquerque that summer where I met Jules. So weird fate, how things work. Anyway, but anyway, it's always, you know, just a pleasure to see and hear MJ again. And let's see. She has too long of a bio to do the whole thing, but she's director of the Visual and Performing Arts minor program, writer in residence and lecturer in creative writing at St. John Fisher College in Rochester, and also also an adjunct lecturer in creative writing at the College of Brockport. And some of you know they have a great writers program at Brockport. She's been a teaching artist working with students in the schools. She has a number of poetry collections. The most recent, This Thirst, from Kelsey Books, which I highly recommend, as I do the others. As the Crow Flies, from Foothills Publishing, Sometimes Simply, and another Foothills, Between Worlds, and of course, what can we do with that? MJ Iuppa's Greatest Hits. So yeah, and I think I missed a couple. Anyway, she is also you know, just an amazing teacher and poetry workshop leader and so forth. And she has won all kinds of awards, including the New York State Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Adjunct Teaching. I mean, that's a big state, you know, and so that's pretty impressive. And she's also been involved with the New York State Foundation of the Arts and so forth. And another very cool fact about MJ, she and her husband, Peter, they've been running an organic farm up in Hamlin, New York, not far from Lake Ontario, for 20 years. So I don't know how she does all of these things, but she does. And anyway, I'm very, very pleased to welcome MJ Iuppa to New Mexico.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, John, for that wonderful and warm and welcoming introduction. We have a long history, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for all the people that we met. And I'm really grateful that Margaret Randall tipped you off to meet a wonderful woman, right? To meet Jules. I think that I didn't realize that little tidbit of information. So I'm excited about it. I was very, Lauren, your poems are just gorgeous. And I love the one that's dedicated to your grandmother, who is my Aunt Irene. Lauren is my first cousin once removed. Her father is my first cousin, and his father was my uncle. Okay, so that I understand that. And then what comes after that is your second cousin. When I don't really understand why they go to the side, but those cousins go to the side. So I guess it makes you closer to me, Lauren. But one of the things that I have always been impressed with in relationship to Lauren's work is the music of the line in her poetry and her vibrant images. And this is certainly tied to her ability as a quilter. Those quilts, if you have a chance to see them, they are so gorgeous. And even to own one, really beautiful. So as John said, I am going to be reading from the last book, which is This Thirst. And my cover is a design by a printmaker by the name of Elizabeth King Durand, and she is a really, really good friend of mine. She also teaches, I taught with her at the Memorial Art Gallery as a teenager, and now she teaches with me at St. John Fisher. So there's a really interesting thing about Rochester is that people loop and re-loop and re-loop. They may go away and then they come back. And you know people for a very, very long time. So the first poem that I would like to read is I Am Happy to Be Standing Here. Like a bad metaphor, I think I know something that you need to know. I think it's a parable that wants to be a conversation between two dodgy listeners. I think you can lose your shadow in the river, whether it's rushing or still. Today, I dedicate this to you, you who dare to follow me. Taking your time. We're currently in a transition into spring. It's been pretty dry here, so spring is coming pretty rapidly. Taking your time. So this begins in November. On this dark morning in November, the candle's amber light struggles against chill, against shadows, pulling in corners, waiting to slither away with the hour you've just lost to the hall clock's sweeping hands. You can't fix this. Every year, just when you think you have mastered the hour that puts you ahead, you find yourself waking to an hour that repeats itself. It doesn't matter what happened. Don't wish for the candle's eternal light. It has an empty side. Holiness has time on its hands. Think of your family as an orchard heavy with apples. You have a penknife and a loaf of crusty bread. Think of what you can do that isn't in books. You won't expire, not in this hour's half-light. Winter is coming. Time to put tired things away. I decided to read it to you because my students have not made the adjustment yet to daylight saving time springing ahead again. I feel so sorry for them. And I have a 9 o'clock class, which isn't really ungodly, but it's hard. They're rubbing their eyes through the day or the morning or the hour, right? The next one is called Goodwill. And it's in 4 sections. 1, oh, empty sky, will it rain? Sunflowers lean heavy-headed against a worn fence. Like refugees, they wait for a message to fall from a passing bird's beak. 2, who sent you? Shadows that loses its head, its hands, push through the doorway, the scent of the garden on your skin. 3, if I turn around quickly, will I see my past? The sound of the brass bell is gone, and with it, cherry cobbler served in glass bowls, my boarding pass to a cloistered life of schoolgirls. 4, when can you buy findings called etc.? Metaphors can be hooks and eyes and snaps, a box full of lonely buttons, zippers without teeth, anything I wish for, found in an old dresser drawer. The next poem I'm going to read is an ekphrastic poem, and it's based on a colored woodcut by Masu Ikeda. And it was at the Memorial Art Gallery in a special exhibit on printmaking, and I really fell in love with this woodcut. I actually wished I had it. And it's called Boy with a Bird, 1964. Outside an open doorway, A boy sits cross-legged. His silky black hair falls over his eyes. Evening's bronze shadows pool around his slender body, holding him still. From dusty
So
eaves,
here's
a sparrow
it's called
flutters.
string
Ha-
relationships.
Oh, I don't know. Landing on his
The
shoulder.
essential idea is this:
Hold on,
the man
I'm
you
meeting
love
people
is
here.
connected to
Something,
you
just hold
no
on.
matter what. He's
Somebody is
also
not muted.
good.
Family. Okay.
Kind of interesting to have a double voice there, though, whatever
Yeah,
we
they're
were
supposed to
doing,
be
right?
muted when they come in, so sorry
Okay.
about that. Okay.
That's fine. All right. So evening's brown shadows pool around his slender body, holding him still. From dusty eaves, a sparrow flutters, landing on his shoulders without fear. It looks deeply into the boy's eyes for a long time, waiting for tears to fall freely and quench its thirst. It's going to be interesting to see how many things Lauren and I actually intersect on in terms of a family way of thinking, the way that in which we think. So many layers of gray. Curse me, my thumb bleeds. Silver roadside thistle gone to needle. Pricks a warning. I didn't heed its message from death. I didn't think of prophecy. I didn't know the rickety door to this world would bring me maturity. What else would be mine before sundown? I stand toothless, my thumbs soaked in my mouth's comfort. I think God knows how this ends, disheveled, dragging an arm through a discarded winter coat. I turn blank face to the countryside burning in autumn's fire and think I'm a window washer's widow. I haven't seen clearly for a year, living in the dark city of my head. Kind of remarkable because Lauren talks about autumn's fire as well. And again, and we have that same image. I like that. I wrote this next poem because I was pretty unhappy about gossip, about people gossiping, and half the time I really don't even, I'm not keenly aware of it, and then I'm aware of it, and then I get annoyed by it, right? And so this is the title's in parentheses. So it's the concept of having the title as a thought in one's head. It doesn't matter what happened. The air is fidgety inside the conversation balloons inflating above our heads. Oh, molecules, how can you be so cruel? Snapdragons rattle on the windowsills. We're stunned to think of what we said with our backs turned. I know, somehow it made me feel better. One apple among many. What John was mentioning, we have really, really big gardens here, and it's always a big ambition. And I have a real problem. We start our plants from seeds, and we are growing organic vegetables, and we've had some really great years, and I'm hoping that this one will be as well. But I have a real problem of not killing something. I inherited this love of the land from my grandmother, which would be Lauren's great-grandmother, Anna Iuppa, and she was an incredible woman. She was a woman of action, and actually few words, woman of action. And she was incredible seamstress. And actually, I would call her a tailor. She was a master of it, and had these very, very beautiful gardens. And I would go to her house and just watch her and sort of take it all in and try not to get it in the way of what she was doing. And so consequently, because of that, that fueled coming here to buy this little postage stamp farm and do this farming. And we planted 1,638 trees, and 38 of them were our orchard, which still exists. So this is that poem that the orchard is a big metaphor for me, and this landscape and where I am is something I'm writing about out of all the time in point of inspiring me to figure out how this life goes. One apple among many. If my appetite matches my eye's desire to smell, to bite, to taste what I've picked loose from the branch high over my head, I would hold its shape of plenty close to my chest, hoping for a moment where I'm completely calm and able to carry this apple cradled among many back to the kitchen sink without letting it fall with certain explosion onto the orchard's eternal grasses. If my whole life has wagered conditional tense, what would happen if I took a bite? Would I be closer to the man who taught me how to dream? And I think that is really true about the mythology that we create for ourselves. And I really do think our landscape is an informant, a great teacher for us. Okay, I'm gonna. The next two poems are, goes back in time in Rochester. My family had a cottage on Lake Ontario. A lot of our families would come and be there in the summertime. And it was a true cottage for many years. And then it became my sister Karen's house, and she's a visual artist. And the lake is a source of inspiration for it. But when you're living close to a body of water like that, it's really hard to get it out of your system. So this is this is called Ontario Chronicle, and it's 1970. That's the year I graduated from high school. It was the last year of the lottery for my friends, who were part of that lottery for the Vietnam War. And we, at that time, when, as an 18-year-old, we were allowed to go to bars. Drinking was legal. I always qualify this with my students now, because I know that they're doing it anyway, but, I'm saying we were, this was legal, wasn't in like we're trying to get into it. And there, in that particular August, when they drew the lottery, it was at a dive bar in Checo's. And that whole summer is around that. So it's in relationship of, we were on tenterhooks about who was going to have to go to war, who was going to stay, who was going to get to go to college, etc. So that's a bit of the backdrop on that, indirectly a sideway lead. So Ontario Chronicle, 1970. I was the one who waited on the battered dock until the last possible moment, hypnotized by the sun's blood orange tokens, dimpling the lake's slow swell of waves, rising but not breaking before reaching the lee shore. I remember dreaming then, my future sealed in the horizon's thin envelope of light. Where did it go? Love calls me to hurry back to the bonfires burning bright, the birdhouse with its nesting purple martins. Some flew beyond the drizzle of sparks to feed on the mosquitoes stirred up by the billowing smoke. Tourists found the summer ritual a prophecy, the fierce chrysanthemum arcing in the night sky, iridescent petals floating on Ontario's stillness. I found this summons to walk its shimmering path terrifying. And the thought of, I've been thinking a lot about that particular time. And, I think Jules, when you mentioned that you were going to do a lottery, all of a sudden, I think that's the reason why I was, going like, well, it seems to be in the air. I just finished teaching Shirley Jackson's The Lottery and to classes, and we're having a pretty interesting discussion about that as well.
Luckily, we're not doing that type of lottery.
Yeah, I know. But you know what I mean? But it's supposed to be that fair choice, that idea of fair choice, right? I mean, that's the principle behind that. And, it's just, I'm teaching a class called Writing the Revolution. What a perfect time to be teaching this class, right? And there is this, my students are, I think I might have some revolutionaries on my hands. I have sort of cultivated this, right? But I also told them, I said, well, like, if you don't like the concept of revolution, we'll just put parentheses around the R and we'll call it evolutionary. I mean, that could be good, right? That idea of, like, how we're going to change it. And so they are going along with me on that. And but we're looking at culture and society, family and institutions. It's been pretty interesting. So this is the title poem of this collection. It's called This Thirst. There is a long thirst that comes in the hours past midnight. It wakes me from my nightly dream of climbing a rough-faced mountain. This thirst pulls me up out of bed without waking you. And before my eyes can see, I find myself in the amber hue of the nightlight, where I steady myself against the cool bath basin. Before I reach to draw water, I spot a tent moth that has found its way to love the warm light, resting with its mouth pressed against the drain, drinking deeply the drip of water that pools there. I have an impulse to touch its owl-like wings to see if it's still alive, but hesitant. When I see my brute hand reaching down, knowing that both of us have surrendered to this moment and neither one of us have grasped our dream. All right, and then I'm just gonna read I'm gonna read one more poem out of this, and then I'm gonna read you a new poem. Well, maybe I'll just go to the new poem. I want to thank you again for inviting me. There is a journal online, Betsy Andrews and oh gee, I'm gonna ruin these editors' names, but they're really wonderful. And the name of the journal is called Global Poemics, and they have illustrations. And they just accepted another poem, which I'm going to read you. And I've been matched with this very beautiful 14-year-old artist. Her name is Vanara, and Veranda. It's very, very beautiful work, and it's lyrical in how she presents things. I just am wild about her. So over this year, I've been on Zoom a lot and going to meetings, and how are we going to handle these students and keep them safe and so they won't get sick, and it's all this stuff. And I'm no longer, I'm a grandmother, right? I'm no longer having little kids, but my young colleagues have children, and they have these fake backgrounds in the back, which I probably should get, fake backgrounds behind them. And the children come into the meetings and sort of a breach. All of a sudden you see an arm, a leg, a head come through the fake background and then slip back out. And then they mute themselves, and you can see what they're mouthing, right? So I was inspired by St. John Fisher for this. And of course I added my own imagination to it. I can't help it. And then, but I did send it out to the Fisher community, got a lot of feedback, which was interesting because when you do post things that have nothing to do with work or whatever, they can be very annoyed with you for doing that. You know, they can say stuff, please stop sending us stuff. I've been pretty good about it. So, because as the director of the arts, I was always doing performances and begging people to come to this and to that, and they would come, which was really nice. But some of my colleagues thought I was worse than spam. I had so many things that were going out every day. So this is called Zoom Hour, and it's a prose poem. And it has several several paragraph stanzas. Zoom Hour. Sitting in the discomfort of being here, I know you are listening and not listening. I know you have things on your mind. I know you are looking at your keyboard, doing two things at once, wishing the cat would jump up on your lap, or the dog begging to have its head scratched, or your 8-year-old who's been quiet all morning, pleading outside your workroom for a cheese and mustard sandwich on soft white bread without crust and cut into triangles and served on the red plate that says, "This is your day." And you will shout as we read your lips, "Wait, I am trying to do something. Give me a minute." I know you're listening for the reassuring sound of your child's full body thud just outside of your door and those tiny nails. You really should clip those nails, dragging against the hardwood floor in that slow, deep scratch that takes your breath and proves that I know you are listening and not listening. I can see your eyes close, even as I'm talking, and I am grateful that you showed up today. I know you know time is precious. You don't need to hear it. Refresh, start again. Thank you, John.
Thank you, MJ. Wonderful. Thank you. Can
Well,
everyone
unmuting, give a
Yeah,
clapping
yeah.
hand for MJ.
Hey.
Oh,
Very
thank you.
good. Okay.
Love that Zoom poem.
So good.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
You know, you can see the kid just like falling flat. You know what I mean? There's a lot of dramatics that goes on, and the parents are really trying to hold it together. Funny.
Know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording now. I will pin John here, but thank you for coming to KAKTUS, and we'll post this on the website. Let's
Thanks,
see.
everybody.